Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. Today's podcast is going to touch on some of the most prevalent and prominent conversations happening right now in the entire medical world and health and performance world. We're going to talk about optimization of the brain. We're going to talk about red light therapy. We're going to talk about energy optimization in as much as it influences and impacts our ability to think, focus, and ultimately perform mentally. Today, I sit down personally in his office with Dr. Lew Lim, a doctor of natural medicine with multiple degrees and diplomas and certifications and professional accreditations in engineering, neuroscience, business, and even accounting. And Dr. Lim is a true genius in his field, a true pioneer in his field of red light therapy. His interest began many years before it was the relatively significant fad or relatively significant science it is now. His technology utilizes light within the red and near infrared spectrum to stimulate the body, particularly the mitochondria, to release energy. And so you may be familiar with Dr. Lim's technology if you see people walking around wearing an incredibly unusual looking device on their head and shining light up their nose. But this technology is truly innovative, incredibly effective. I use it personally most days, probably 4 or 5 days a week, and the difference I feel is tremendous. This technology, which we're going to discuss in detail, is called the Vielight, which ultimately helps the body to release nitric oxide, relax blood vessels, and ultimately lead to improve circulation in the brain, and can do so in the body as well when you use red light anywhere on the body. It's so useful when it comes to people looking to heal their brain or regenerate tissue and ultimately recover from any type of traumatic brain injuries or any type of brain degradation over age. So a few points from today's podcast: how to use infrared light therapy and ultimately what's called photobiomodulation to enhance brain function. We do a deep dive into what's called the default mode network and its importance to the overall brain. We talk a little bit about Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. We talk about the significance behind a particular frequency in the brain called 40 hertz. We talk about some limitations with that normal LEDs would have. So you can't just shine any light up your nose. It doesn't quite work the same. It has to be a very specific frequency. How to personalize the treatment of photobiomodulation for yourself based on whether you're trying to improve from illness, optimize recovery, or ultimately enhance brain function overall. Talk about the ongoing research on traumatic brain injuries and so much more. Today's podcast is truly a deep dive, and I feel incredibly blessed to bring this incredible expert to you and to myself and the world. And today's podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Buy Optimizers. This mega deal is available only for my listeners with my code MUSCLE10. Yes, you heard that right. Now, you've already obviously heard me speak about Buy Optimizers. If you've ever heard this podcast before, you know I love their products. These guys are truly pioneers in the space. They're not just doing Me Too products like everybody else. They're doing some of the most effective product formulations that I've ever come across. If you're not already using their based formulations, go over there now and take advantage of this incredible deal. This is not even the type of deal you'll find on Amazon or anywhere else. This deal is going to knock your socks off. Ladies and gents, thank you very much for being listeners to the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. Head over to buyoptimizers.com and use the code MUSCLE10. That's BIOPTIMIZERS.com/muscle. Or if you just go to buyoptimizers.com and use the code MUSCLE10, you get hooked up with an incredible discount, but don't waste any time. And now on with our podcast with Dr. Lim. Dr. Lew, I'm absolutely grateful to be in your amazing building. I've been a fan of your device for a long time, and I'm learning some incredible things that this is capable of. So thank you for making the time to be here and present to myself and the audience what Vielight really is and what it's capable of doing. So I want to get back to, everyone starts with the background, and I think that's important to talk about, like, where did this come from? And why was this an area of interest for you? And maybe you could talk a little bit about your background when it comes to brain optimization.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about the technology, which is what I'm usually interested in talking. I think it's still relatively novel, using light to stimulate the body or the brain. It was more novel a few years ago, but I think people are starting to understand red light therapy. They hear a lot about it.
Yeah.
Especially athletes, people who are aspiring to be athletes. So it's not that new, but just a little bit of reminder. It gets interesting because of the fact that light within red and near infrared, this window spectrum can actually activate your body, particularly gets down to the mitochondria, to release more energy. But the more important thing is that it is able to perform some interesting things like releasing the trapped nitric oxide in the electron transport chain, release it back to your body, relaxes the blood vessels, you get more blood circulation, and nitric oxide has some other good functions as well. But the other thing it does is it helps to release growth factors, growth as in helping the tissue to regrow and repair, including the brain. So you get certain substances like brain-derived neurotrophic factors that helps your brain to recover, to even regenerate new neurons and connectivity and stuff like this. So that's the technology part of it. Vielight is, I would say, we're at the frontiers of discovering a lot of new things. Particularly, we focus on the brain, but in the meantime, we don't forget the body. And what we've done has, particularly in the area of, say, the immune system. So I guess the big thing that we achieved recently was the approval of Health Canada to be able to make a claim that this helps with treating COVID-19.
Wow.
So maybe you've not heard about it.
No.
Have you introduced?
Yeah, I'd love to hear mechanistically how it's happening.
Yeah. So that's that. So it does show that the regulatory authorities are beginning to recognize that, not because of what a lot of people are saying, not because of the word of mouth, but we are starting to support photobiomodulation, its effect on the body. For now, for the brain, we have quite a lot of data too, to treat even conditions. So this is based on robust data.
Yeah.
And so that's indication of it's working on.
Yeah. So before we get into the data, which I want to get into at length, is let's walk through this device and what is on this device and what exactly is it doing. So we know there's a light that you suggest shining up your nose. You've got other things on here as well. If you just walk us through this device, I'm very curious what all these things are.
Okay, this is the model that we is available to the public to help with brain stimulation. Now, why is it designed this way? You can have people hear about photobiomodulation. So okay, get yourself exposed to red light panel and all that. So why do we even bother to have it specifically like that? We could have had in an easy way would have been do a safety helmet.
Yeah.
A lot of the LEDs there just kind of just put them together, turn on the switch and shine the brain. Now this way of doing it is appreciating the fact that red and near-infrared light can penetrate through the scalp, into the cranium and into the brain. Okay, that is what red and near-infrared light can do. It penetrates to a certain level, and then there's indirect signaling going on. Then you get the whole brain responding. What we are doing this specifically is to locate these modules, LED modules, on specific locations for a couple of reasons. One of which is we are directing this to a network called a default mode. And this are pointing to the hubs or the nodes of the default mode.
So there's 4 different hubs, is that right?
Yeah, these are the hubs
Yep.
that are connected together to form the default mode network. And the default mode network is kind of like a template network of your brain. It's called default mode because, when you're not doing much, this is the default network that is operating in your brain. Usually when that's healthy, your brain is healthy. So it's good to treat it. And it is related to a number of conditions like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's, general functioning of the brain. This is what we strive to achieve, to do that. So we do that because it also keeps things simple. Now we have specific modules so that we can manage the power. You need a certain, what we call power density to have an effect on the brain. Too little does nothing, too much will give an overdose. So we want to be able to manage the power to have at least a certain level of power density. Now, if you just have a normal LED, normally the LEDs are, available off the shelf. In my opinion, is not enough to give you enough penetration to give you to achieve the certain level of outcomes in the brain. So we do this. Otherwise, it is probably better to just go out into the sun,
Yeah.
Actually, do not underestimate the healthy benefits of going out into the sun.
Yeah.
It's good for you, full spectrum. But being able to do this allows us to have the more power to a certain level without some of the negative side effects of the sun. If you go out there, it's uncontrolled, you are exposed to ultraviolet light, so you exposed too long, you may have other problems. Now, this also allows us to do things like, other than focusing on certain areas, allows it to pulse a certain frequency.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do this in the sun. The sun is still good for you, but this allows us to explore and achieve certain outcomes that we target.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we are discovering is that when we pulse at certain frequency, you get different effects. Certain power gives you certain effects. So while we are still investigating, we are forever doing research, and you will experience that a bit later when you do the EEG. Allows us to continue to explore what is possible with a device like this. What is possible if we change the parameters? But for now, we make something available that is easy to use. You press a button, and that is generally for most people is going to have a brain. We pulse it at 10 hertz, which is alpha in EEG terms, and 40 hertz, which is gamma.
And you can alternate between those on the device?
There's a button there. You can just switch. Like this is a duo, you can switch back and forth. Or you can just have the alpha. Like we generally recommend the alpha 10 hertz for, say, traumatic brain injury. It is based on the data and based on literature. Other people have done some work too. And it's not as exact as the gamma at 40 hertz, which we are recommending for, say, for issues that relate to memory. Gamma helps with memory consolidation. And if we go higher, it maybe, helps with training the memory as well. So, and also the gamma is now being used in our clinical study for Alzheimer's disease. It is used elsewhere at 40 hertz for Parkinson's disease because at 40 hertz, other than, the functionality of the brain, try to get other brain functions together, gamma, it helps to activate a certain group of brain cells called the microglia, the non-inflammatory types to remove this unwanted deposits in the brain, like the beta amyloid associated with Alzheimer's disease, like the alpha-synuclein that's associated with Parkinson's disease, and generally helps to just clear this stuff from the brain.
Yeah. So can you talk to me about the electrical, I guess the voltage? So you say the, too low is not going to do anything, too much is going to do a lot. I'm curious, and this is, not hugely relevant, but I'm actually very curious
amount of electrical voltage is coming out of that? What is the range you guys suggest? And then what's too much? Because you say if someone goes just at home and shines an LED on their head, it's not going to penetrate deep enough. I'm curious what the voltage is in that case.
So it's not usually the voltages, is in milliwatts.
Milliwatts.
So watt is an expression of the energy in terms of dosage. So here we try to get enough wattage in terms of milliwatts to have enough penetration, but not too much that we think can damage. Now, what we use here is LED. In the 20, 30 years ago, people were using lasers. The lasers is more like coherence. There's more concentration on the photons going in your brain. And that is, you have to exercise more care in doing that. But LED, when they're in contact with the skin, does pretty much what the laser does, because you don't have the attenuation from the distance. So that is, we use that. Now we want to have enough. Now what we try to figure within ourselves, what actually works. So from literature, from experience, we want to have enough, like say over here, we are looking at 75 milliwatts per square centimeter. So when you do per centimeter is the density of the light energy going to that particular spot. At the back, we are trying to achieve 100 milliwatts. We can go a little bit above that. And the nose is 25 milliwatts. So we believe that this amount of energy over a certain period of time, like we do this for 20 minutes, it shuts off automatically in 20 minutes. It gives you enough dose for the day without doing too much for overstimulation or too little. One thing about photobiomodulation, there are reports with other helmets that have much lower power density seem to have an effect. So photobiomodulation has an effect even with low, but maybe suboptimal. So it can, it does some, but you can do more.
So what would be the negative? The reason I asked that question is, what would be the negative side of if someone were to do this repeatedly, or if the wattage were too much, or the wattage?
Okay, you want to have enough? No. I mentioned about not doing too much is because what photobiomodulation does, I talked about the mitochondria. The other thing it releases are free radicals. I'm talking here about, free radicals that need to be removed, right? So your body is always trying to neutralize the free radicals, and if you do too much accumulation, your body is not having enough to remove that, so you accumulate your free radical in your brain. So these are, biologically, it's the reactive oxygen species, ROS. Your body releases the SOD, superoxide dismutase, to help neutralize it. And at some point in time, the swing goes, the other way. So you want to avoid that. So we think there's the amount of time for, once a day for some people, once in 2 days for most people is probably enough.
Yeah, you said that previously. So someone who's got a healthy brain once every other day is good for maintenance?
Yeah. It also depends on the tolerance. You feel that, okay, you're going through a lot of stress, you're doing a lot of mental work, or you're getting stressed, or you're undergoing, say, some impairment in your brain, you can do more. I've known of people who do it twice a day without any side effect. And I've known of people who just 5 minutes, they feel too much.
So overstimulated?
Yeah, some people are sensitive, or even to light. We have just the intranasal. They're very low powered. I've come across people who are so finely tuned. They're outliers, actually. And they feel, this is too much. So, but this is a generalization for most people. If you don't feel a negative effect like headache, or you feel exhausted, it's probably okay. If you start to feel some exhaustion or some dryness, okay, cut back. But I would say when we say once every 2 days is probably okay for most people.
Yeah. So of the people that you've sold this to, which I'm sure is high, have you had any people coming back with any effects saying, hey, this is what I experienced negatively?
Generally, no. Maybe,
But some,
maybe they can't be bothered to report back to us and find a way to, to accommodate this. But I would say, generally in the field of photobiomodulation, there's hardly any side effect. We've got like 100,000 devices in the field.
Yeah.
Hardly anybody come back and report, problems. Some people generally have reported, okay, when we have dealing with them, they may say if they have a slight headache, they cut back and they go back and use it. They get used to it. So,
it's kind of an attenuation. You get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason I'm so curious about the wattage is because I've heard, specifically with like things like PMF to the body or different, call it biohacking interventions, that the more wattage tends to be better. People say, hey, like this thing, if it was a higher wattage, it would be even more effective. And I just wanted to really ask that question from you, because I know that message gets perpetuated a lot around the world. Like these things need to be higher wattage, but that's not the truth.
Yeah, if I use a laser, there are some of the earlier studies are measuring penetration of light into the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the mistake is you use a cadaver, you try to use a photometer and see how much penetration it goes through. You are very tempted to use like a powerful laser because you're not measuring 5 inches. Okay, some people, we have people in the field things that you got to reach a certain part of your brain, maybe 2 inches deeper or something. So I'm not measuring this through this cadaver, like sheep brain, or tissues. I think it's a mistake because you cannot use dead tissues and compare with live tissues and brain because there's a lot of signaling going on. The same people who used to do that now are recognizing that because you can't run away from the truth, which is brain imaging, clinical outcome, and saying that you don't need that much power, If you use a laser with 15 watts, which try to get it that, you can be toasting the brain, right? So you may have some effect, but you better be moving it around quickly because before you may see smoke coming out of your scalp. So then you
feels like a bad idea.
Then you have a barbecue situation.
Exactly. No good.
So that is it wasn't enough.
Yeah. So the long and short of it sounds like we're creating energy increases. We're allowing the body to rid itself of some of the negative metabolites. We're increasing nitric oxide production, dilating some of the blood vessels, which logically in my mind would have a systemic effect in the brain. Just like if I, contract my bicep, it's not just going to work one specific part. It's going to be, it's going to find its way into the entire duration of the muscle. So it's similar in the brain. It's going to, this metabolic response will be pretty much around the entire brain.
Yeah, we got there's some data coming out of research saying that while they're treating this, they are finding that they are exercising better, their endurance is better. But this is, you might get to interview some of these people who can report that, particularly when they have some impairment in the brain, like from concussion and traumatic brain injury. But we're also finding out from performers, athletes who are just treating on the brain, and they are also experiencing better endurance, performance, and recovery from exercise. So this has your brain controls the body, so it has an effect. But there is also our intranasal visible red. We think visible red through the nose. It doesn't go that much to the brain, so it's going through the body and it has a systemic effect. We're getting reports from athletes who are saying, I'm experiencing systemic effects in terms of muscle recovery.
Nitric oxide.
With the red. So we are seeing systemic effect, and this is going through the circulatory system and getting distributed to the body. What we know is the mitochondria is not necessarily embedded in your tissues. There's also free-floating mitochondria in your blood circulatory system. So as it gets circulated and exposed to red light, it does pretty much the same thing, get activated, get more oxygenated, do this,
Yep.
producing more energy.
So you mentioned some athletes who had some brain injuries, CTE, and they've had tremendous experience or tremendous results. Let's talk a bit about that. So people who are experiencing these brain, have had brain trauma, increasing the energy of their brain, what type of results are they reporting back?
So I would like you to interview a couple
Larry
of these
Kent,
people.
yeah.
One of whom is Carr.
Carr, yeah.
He is now a professor at University of Utah. He has his PhD in exercise kinesiology and exercise physiology. Now he was a professional football player. He had concussion. It was so bad that he was losing control of his behavior. This is quite typical of CTE. CTE develop when you have repetitive trauma to your brain rather than just one impact. So over a period of your career, you develop that. And he was featured, he wasn't named in the study that was published just a few months ago by Boston University, Margaret Nazer. He was subject 1, and so you can read the paper and see how he has progressed. But there's nothing like him speaking, telling his experience. And he now, he's reporting now that he's done follow-up brain imaging, and he has significant regeneration of his brain cells. The one thing about CTE is, when you have CTE and you don't know you have CTE until you do an autopsy of the brain, and that's when you're dead. What you see in this imaging of the brain is the brain has shrunk. There are significant. This shrinking of the brain is drawing the functioning of your prefrontal cortex, which govern your behavior. So when you lose control of that, you lose control, and you become violent and stuff like that. So these are symptoms, but they are supported by imaging too. So it'll be great.
I'd love to, yeah.
Go to that. But before CTE, people get concussions and they get impairments like maybe headache or fog, brain fog and stuff like that. There is data, hopefully it will be published soon, that shows improvement there. But we have earlier data too, from a professional hockey player, from people with traumatic brain injury recovering. We have one case, a professional hockey player at San Jose Shark, and he recovered from his clinical symptoms as well as we did imaging with his brain. He had regrowth in the hippocampal area, which is
amazing.
The brain. So that's
yeah. And so I know you guys are doing a lot of studies in many different places. So you said Utah, Boston University, here in Toronto at CAMH. I'm curious if you want to start sharing one of the ones that are maybe most interesting to you right now relative to what you're seeing experientially.
Okay. What's most interesting to me, other than clinical and all this good stuff, is going to the frontier, breaking new ground, discovering new things that we cannot explain. But, facts are facts. The imaging are showing the changes in the brain. Now, what's really exciting me, we are looking at the changes in the function of your brain, how it's affecting your cognition, how if you're a meditator, maybe you get to experience this soon, how it's elevating meditators to a different state, I'm not a meditator, so I'm not very good at explaining the experience, but we can see in the imaging. So we're looking at the effect of different parameters, like I talk about power density, that has an effect. The pulse frequency, how much you pulse it, we're talking about 10 and 40.
You can manipulate that for either 10 or 40?
So we have a device called a NeuroPro, which allows you to sweep from continuous right up to 10,000 hertz. And most people don't experience much, maybe some negative at very high frequencies, but meditators have a sweet spot that they hit, and even non-meditators that they get an enhanced experience with the brain. So we're doing that research. We are seeing this in EEG, we are seeing this in their related experience in measures, and we are still trying to explain why this is happening.
So talk to me about 10,000 hertz on the brain. That feels like a little bit. I like to see the outliers. Like I want to see push the frontier. What's going on at 10,000 hertz? So the brain works in much lower frequencies than that, right?
Yeah.
We're nowhere near that typically. What's the highest brain frequency in gamma?
I tell you what I know.
All right.
Is that I don't know.
Yeah. Thought that was coming.
I tried 1,000 hertz and it does nothing for me. I don't feel any difference. So I'm not sensitive in that way. I'm not a long-term meditator. But I've got a researcher in meditation who understands the brain and using our device. And in the early days, he felt this 40 hertz is doing interesting things. Then we started to go into 100 hertz, 200 hertz, 400 hertz. His sweet spot used to be like 120 hertz, 200 hertz. Today he's doing 1,000 hertz.
Wow. So
only he can tell you what is like. But in the early days when he was going to higher frequency, the experience was not as good as lower frequency, but maybe, as he adapts to this, it's higher. I don't know too many people needing to go to 1,000 hertz, but it's there if you want.
Right. So talk to me what's happening in the brain when you're subjecting it to these frequencies. Is it entrainment? Is that really what we're looking at?
No, it is. Okay, let me tell you what is happening. We point to the default mode network, okay? And when you're a meditator, you want to get out of the default mode network. So this is the irony of this thing is, how come we're pointing at the default mode network, but the meditators are experiencing these great things, which means that they have to be out of the default mode network. Now, it means a couple of things, and I am hypothesizing, and one day we'll come up with a paper when you have more data, is as you experience a higher frequency with this, it actually, usually when you get past 40 hertz gamma, you start to get out of the default mode and start to go into another network, which is more related to meditation. And folks, meditators out there for research, this might be interesting to you. Now you are starting to activate the parts of the brain that are not related to the default mode network. You're talking about the dorsal prefrontal, the precuneus, and the posterior cingulate cortex, the entire cortex, and those areas. But you could be activating those parts of the brain that relates more to this higher state, which is the insular anterior cingulate cortex. It's in the literature. This was done through imaging with fMRI. So at high frequency, actually, by pointing where these are located on the default mode network, high frequency actually gets you out of it.
Got it.
And into the other network. Okay, this is my theory, and I think I will be supported by data later. Because we tried to do the high frequency at other locations, it doesn't work. So was a real puzzle that only can be explained this way.
So the brain's an electrical organ. So we're sending these frequencies into the brain with light, and that's in some way impacting the electrical signature of the brain. So it's affecting its electrical signature, which is theta, alpha, beta, gamma. So where it's spending most of its time. Does that make sense? Is that correct? I just want to understand.
These are the things we also learning. Like, I want to achieve 40 hertz in your brain for whatever reason. Part of it is, related to Alzheimer's disease and stuff. Okay, for meditators, okay, your sweet spot will be 120 hertz, but we may not be achieving it the way we want, like if I induce 40 hertz, doesn't mean that I would probably get a big percentage of the people who have 40 hertz in the brain, but not everybody, because what we are finding out, watch out for the data when it get published, is some people are hitting gamma off the chart when we're inducing 4 hertz. And we have cases where we induce 40 hertz and they're not getting 40 hertz in EEG. We're spiking at 4 hertz. So it's the other way. Now, that tells me that every brain is different.
Yeah.
Okay. The bottom line is the brain, now we're doing this meditation study, the brain is responding to the way we do it for the biomodulation in significant ways because we compare against placebo. Placebo is pretty much nothing's happening. When we're doing this on the brain is responding, but responding very differently. So which means that we have to do more work, and we can go into that at some stage, what we're going to do. But this is what we're finding. Now, what is also very interesting is we're doing work with Reza from Cambridge Center for Addiction and Mental Health at the University of Toronto. He's an EEG expert. But we're also doing work with Baycrest Hospital on real-time fMRI and finding really interesting things. Different power has different effect, different pulse frequency have different effect, different locations have different effect. And we are seeing some combinations on a scene that the brain fully lights up with certain combination. We are still doing the study. We have to get more subjects because we may show different things with different subjects. But definitely, this has an effect on the brain. Now, fMRI shows a couple of things. It shows the blood oxygen level dependency, BOLD, bold. But when we measure also the cerebral blood flow, is also very significant, but they're also different. And it is teaching us a number of things yet to be published. But I'm just saying it, when data comes out, it will support, more hypothesis that the oxygen with further biomodulation at certain wavelength is being used up by the mitochondria more effectively. So I just want to say that because going to the mechanism can be quite complicated.
Got it. So increased blood flow, increased mitochondrial function, just like we talked about in the beginning, and people are seeing that benefit across the board.
Right, yeah.
What are you interested about in the study? You said we're going to study this next in that meditation study. What's the direction that you guys are going to pursue?
We will, ultimately, now that we pretty much, not just us, but many people have confirmed that further biomodulation does have a big effect on the brain. Okay. Now, how can we make it better? I am comparing it with other forms of brain stimulation, like electrical stimulation, magnetic stimulation.
Yep.
Now there is more discussion about focused ultrasound. So these are other methods. Personally, looking at the data, I believe that without you feeling the sensation, like electrical stimulation, you pump up power, you feel tingling in your brain, and the transcranial magnetic stimulation, you actually feel a knocking in your higher power. So these are the effects, but this you don't really feel anything. There's not, if you do it properly, there's no real thermal effect. The brain doesn't heat up with further biomodulation. We know because fMRI can measure all this stuff. There's no thermal effect in the brain if you control it.
Right.
But we can see the response from the brain from this other imaging when I compare it in the literature with TMS and so on. Maybe it's a little bit early, but it's showing that there's possibly more effect. Without these sensations, there's, with the right combination, you can get more effect from the brain.
Yep.
So we are looking into learning more and being able to personalize to each person. I'm particularly interested in brain conditions like dementia and so on, see if we can have actually more effect out of this. We are doing a study using the knowledge, literature, and, having a device that you can do in the clinical trial, you can do use at home, you can have a sham and all that, combinations. But I think one day we'll be able to personalize as we do more. We're not going to delay all this clinical study, but we will continuously do assessments of people with different brain conditions, to personalize it in such a way that it is optimized to help this person, or even for the athlete. I can go into maybe talk about flow state where they perform better.
Yeah. So first I'll say for the listener, I've tried TDCS, so transcranial direct current. It's uncomfortable. You could definitely feel it. And there was a company that used to do it. I think they went out of business. Halo. Yep. Yeah, they showed some promising data. I'm not sure what happened there. I haven't tried the transcranial magnetic stimulation, but I've heard amazing things about it. But you're saying as far as comparing light, electrical, and magnetic stimulation, this one seems to be most promising as far as overall benefit? Or would you think it's on par with magnetic? Because I've heard magnetic is just transformative to people with PTSD and brain trauma.
So TMS has been approved by the FDA to treat depression.
Yep.
I think they're looking to schizophrenia or obsessive compulsive disorder.
Right.
These things.
But it's not pleasant, to have
Oh yeah, you can feel it knocking.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but I think for treatment-resistant depression, it seems to be helping. And now they are, comparing it with maybe ketamine and so on.
They're comparing it to ketamine or combining it with ketamine?
I think there is some studies going on comparing the effects with ketamine. Or
Interesting.
Maybe to do with depression.
So, I don't know how much you know about ketamine. Maybe this is not a question to ask, but ketamine, from what I know, tends to wipe out the default mode network as well. So is that a similar, what they're comparing against is the ability to get out of that default mode of thinking?
Well, what they're trying to do is actually looking at the clinical outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Is it helping with depression?
So it's not mechanistic, it's just clinical outcomes.
There's quite a lot of literature now that supports ketamine for treating depression. Looking to other psychedelics like MDMA for PTSD. That's going on right now. But go back to transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's quite specific because in one location, and they're also using it to possibly treat pain, but putting on more.
And it's incredibly expensive. You have to go somewhere to do it because you can't take it home with yourself, by yourself.
Yeah, we as a company actually are thinking of investing in TMS more for trying to identify the biomarkers to explain why this is working. But TMS seems to be, so it has its own merits. We haven't done a depression studies yet. We're planning to do one. So we can't make any claim whether it's better or worse than TMS. For now, I'd say TMS seems to work for depression. The other one is electroconvulsive therapy, which also there's claim that's published in a high-impact journal. It seems to be working a bit better than TMS, but then that is shocking your brain.
Yeah.
ECT is just shock your brain out to your brain to break up the high connectivity that leads to this problem.
So when you say we talk about clinical relevancy of outcomes, what are we talking about? So if we have 100 people in a study or 20 people in a study, are we talking about 11 of the 20 are seeing positive outcomes, or is everyone in this? I'm curious because obviously there's a wide array of results, but I'm always curious when people in science talk about the outcome of the study, not having read it myself, are you seeing a 10% increase, a 20% increase, or, and across what number of the participants? Is it usually ubiquitous, everyone sees some benefit, but there's obviously a variable amount? I know that's kind of hard to specifically talk about unless you pick one study.
Yeah, there's always people who are not responding. Maybe one or two, maybe small minority, maybe negative. But you're looking at the big body that's, statistically significant number of people responding positively. at significant level. And that's why you need, like, look, if we talk about Halo, I think they made some claim because there's some small numbers responding. I think in 2021, an independent group of academics used Halo and said there's no effect. So that, I think this, and then other people, I think they were at least reporting they're not feeling it.
Yeah.
So you really need to do this control study and a big study. How many people the one thing about devices is really not like like taking a pill or injecting a drug into your body like they do for Alzheimer's. It's easy to have a sham.
Yeah.
You swallow a pill, you don't know whether it's sugar pill or it is an active ingredient. But doing a device is really hard. First of all, we had a lot of problems to be credible in making a sham device being used at home that people can't figure out whether it is sham or active. So it's quite a bit of innovation and engineering involved in doing this. So that is a big difficulty in doing devices. And then the other is the intellectual property. Not too many studies are done with devices because it's really hard to get patents on a device. Usually there's quite a lot of prior art and stuff like that. So without a patent, talking about clinical trials, sham, and all that stuff. So there is not a lot of devices company can do big clinical trials. In fact, actually, most devices that are approved as medical devices are used in labs, in hospitals and clinics, not for home use.
Right.
So that's a big drawback. But we were trying, one thing is we know that on one hand we need big numbers to go out there and get like the FDA approval and show to the scientific community who are naturally skeptical until you show the statistical power.
Yeah.
So to get into mainstream. So that's the difficult part versus drugs. Now, so that is, on the other hand, FDA allow devices to be under the low-risk general wellness category. Even ours, without making a medical claim. So we try to avoid medical claim, except we have not make a claim, but say that we're doing this clinical trial and that clinical trial.
Right.
So,
but you guys did make a medical claim around COVID, right? That was a medical claim. And so do you think mechanistically, like I'm always curious about, like maybe we saw positive outcomes. Do you have any insights as to what you think was happening, why people were seeing a positive outcome?
We have to understand why we think this might work for COVID before we actually put a device into a special clinical trial.
Right.
And hope that you get the results. Right? So so COVID, you got to know it has been approved by Health Canada, so which means that we can only make a claim in Canada. We were reviewed by FDA under emergency use when COVID was around, but when emergency use was lifted, we're no more under emergency use, and we have to do this new big clinical trial. So it's not feasible for us to do that because we were treating acute COVID, which is almost not a thing anymore.
Right.
Some people are still hospitalized. So there's less interest now in acute COVID, even among the medical community. So unfortunately, we got approval rather late in the day. But we are now going to a long COVID study, which is at the moment very important because literally millions of people around the world are experiencing long COVID, the fatigue, the chronic fatigue, the exertional exercise malaise when you do anything, you're really tired, and brain fog. Brain fog is a big thing. So we're focusing on brain fog. Hopefully, by addressing brain fog, the brain, we might help to address this chronic fatigue as well. So that has actually started. We literally recruited our first subject a few days ago. The study is a pilot study now being conducted in Florida. Once we have the pilot study completed and see what the data looks like, if it is good, we'll go into a bigger clinical study for long COVID.
So one thing that, go ahead.
Okay, to treat acute COVID, we weren't focusing on the brain. We were focusing on the respiratory area. So by the time you experience, so we were treating people with serious symptoms of COVID-19 at the time. So it would have gone down to the lower respiratory tract, which means that you want to be able to treat the lung, mainly the lower respiratory tract, and also the other parts of your body. The virus is going to attack the other organs of your body as well, and the brain and so on. So we are focusing, and also the nose area, which they come in. So we have an intranasal, we have this on the chest, the direct near-infrared to the sternum, which has the effect of stimulating the bone marrow, stimulate stem cells, migrate to the thymus area, to mature into the thymus, the T cells, to boost the immune system, also help your body to heal, because photobiomodulation does help reduce the inflammation in your body. We have evidence now that it helps to reduce the pro-inflammatory cytokines, to help it to actually to avoid it getting worse. But now we're moving into long COVID, particularly for the brain.
Yeah, so that's particularly interesting. We didn't actually bring up inflammation at the beginning. We talked about all the potential mechanisms, but if it's dropping inflammation in the brain, I think that's going to have just ubiquitous benefits across the board, because there's so many people, even children, who have inflamed brain. I'm curious, is there specifically data on that, or we just know mechanistically because it's stimulated the mitochondria, increasing nitric oxide, that inflammation will drop? Or do you guys have actual data that shows it?
Yeah, we have some data to show that there's another study that's ongoing right now at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto to look at the metabolites in the brain that would relate to mitochondrial function. So we see how that goes. But there's enough in the literature to show that your neurons is responding because the mitochondria is responding. There's literature showing that the measure relating to oxygenation in the brain.
So as I came in, you mentioned the recent study out of Spain on creativity. I'd love to hear what that result was.
Yeah, so this group in Spain, the researchers ordered our devices some time ago. We didn't know what they were for. Then they published. And so it was great. What they showed was they used the gamma. They gave theoretical reasons why it might help with creativity. Creative relates to better functioning of the brain, or they relate to cognition. So they had certain measures like finding alternate solutions to solve a problem and stuff. So that was significant. I think what's important in that study is they are publishing data on brains that are normal, the normal functioning brain. So that helps us to now get into a territory of what's happening to normal, healthy brains. We are doing imaging, and we are seeing changes in the EEG. I talk about meditators. That is more than normal. The high functioning brains, they get into a different state. And that is more imaging. And until we publish, it's not being peer reviewed. So we can only say,
right,
okay, for sure we see the imaging, and let other people, assess, look at our data and whether they agree or not. But this is peer reviewed, it's been published. So it helps with, you can say creativity can relate to anything, your normal, your schoolwork, in sports, in the field, whatever you're doing in your work.
Do you remember some of the details of the study? Like how many people, what exactly were they measuring?
I don't.
So we could just share it in the podcast in the notes. I'd love to see it.
We can share about it.
Yeah, I'd love to see it, because that's really interesting, because creativity, measures of creativity,
Yeah.
I'd love to see what they're exploring and how many people and what the end result was.
Yeah, obviously you get more details, like what are they actually measuring, number of people, emerging against control, stuff like that. Talking about researchers that have ordered our devices, did independent work, and then we only learned about it when it was published.
Yeah.
There's another group in Italy. Same thing, they had the alpha and gamma, so they can do 1040 hertz, and they did it on autistic children. And the improvement was actually significant. They did alpha and gamma, on the same day, so one in the morning, one in the evening. They had measures for autism, significant improvement. I really value these studies because totally unbiased, we have no influence.
You have no influence.
We only know about it. They didn't even tell us that they were publishing or published. We found these publications ourselves. That's what we really like.
That's incredible. So one of the things that I found very interesting is the number of different areas that you're getting really great feedback, not only research, but just people with experiential feedback, like you said, with Larry Carr and this lady who was on the U.S. judo team. So tell us a little bit more about Larry Carr, his experience, what type of reporting he gave you guys.
So I did mention that he had suffered symptoms that are quite typical with CTE, which is, your brain has shrunk.
Yeah.
So you lose functionality in various parts of your brain, other than not being able to think straight. Your memory is not working. Your brain, in particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive function, controlling your behavior. So that has impaired, and you lose control of your behavior. Now, Larry is completely normal now. He is actually helping us to because he's a professor at the University of Utah, he's very interested in doing, having this research done at his university. The psychiatry department is actually doing quite a lot of work, and they're going to publish some papers too. Now, what Larry is also saying recently is, he's done some imaging of his brain when he did his study at Boston University. He's got some new imaging done at the University of Utah, showing that his brain has regenerated more new brain cells. So he's got more volume in his brain now, and you can tell by, being normal in your behavior, being able to. Actually, Larry is very high functioning. He's pretty sharp.
Yeah.
Now, that can only mean that the CTE, those parts of your brain that has shrunk,
growing back,
has grown back, which is.
How long did he do it?
I think this study was. So when the first study must have been done about I just feel like it's about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. So now he's using the gamma regularly, and that has been, so he has regenerated over time. But the dramatic improvement was seen within the study itself. And what Dr. Nazers, you can see in that paper actually he published, is about 4 cases of retired athletes who had experienced repeated traumatic brain injury and suspected CTE. I don't know whether suspected was used, but you can, like I said, you can only confirm CTE after you're dead and done the autopsy. Yeah. So you suspect it all the time. You can suspect it's CTE because of the symptoms. So he had that, and within that study period, he has recovered dramatically. Actually, what's interesting, they did first week of photobiomodulation, not with our device, with another device, in a lab. And that actually showed that they improved, all 4 of them, but when they stopped, because study over, go home,
right,
they actually declined. All of them declined. Their depression scores were worse, their PTSD scores, sleep scores, different colors with different words, and a bunch of things. So everything got worse.
Really interesting.
But so Dr. Nazers said, use this device you can use at home. So after I think a couple of months without this device, he got back into the device again. And they all improved again. So it shows that CTE is degenerative. It is something that's like Alzheimer's disease, it's just, eats away your brain and you get worse over time.
Yeah.
Normally, it's irreversible. But in his case, it's reversed, including imaging, which shows that regeneration of brain cells.
Right.
When he started using this again. So that study covered improvement, decline, use this, and then improvement again.
Fascinating.
Until whatever time they were using it. And Larry is in touch with us. Like I said, he's a great advocate for the biomodulation.
Yeah. And you said you've had many other athletes, the lady from judo. Any other clinical experiences that you've seen that are just unusual? I'd love to hear about the kind of reportings, findings.
Yeah. So we, a lot of our data is coming out of traumatic brain injury in terms of medical data and stuff like that. We are waiting for some manuscript to be written from data that was obtained maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's wait for that to be published. But like we have smaller cases. Like I said, we published, co-published with University of California, San Francisco with Professor Linda Chow. She has done this work on traumatic brain injury. She did imaging. And it showed very interesting things. So you got clinical measures supported by objective imaging. She has also, now we're talking about UCSF, University of California, San Francisco. She has done a couple of other studies that used our devices. One of which was dementia. She did a case for the 8, she did control those from usual care and those that are using this device. And she tracked them over all 12 weeks. Measures of basically a cognitive measure of your brain performance that are normally used to track dementia patients in a clinical study. ADAS COG. That is, so she did that was improvement. But again, this was supported by imaging that showed the improved. This, I think in that study, she did not do the structural imaging, but she did fMRI that showed improved connectivity in the default mode network to support this data.
Right.
And she did other things like Gulf War illness, which is a problem with the U.S. veterans that came back from the war in Kuwait in the late 90s. Really, came back with problems, headache, and damage in the brain, and wasn't well explained. But the theory is that they inhale these toxins from burn pits and stuff like that. And they showed improvement with the neuro alpha actually. So, and that is, other than people telling us how great they're, improving, we actually have clinical data.
I look forward to seeing all the papers, and I'll link to it all in the show notes. And so one thing that, this is probably a really easy general question. It's like, who should use this? So someone who's sitting at home going, I don't know if this is for me, I don't know if it's not for me. Like, is this the type of thing that everyone would benefit from? Or if you have a really high functioning, healthy brain, there's probably no reason to use it?
I think that based on experience and so on, this is helpful in maintaining your brain, even if your brain's healthy. It probably will improve it, because all healthy brains maybe have some room for improvement. It can improve your cognition. I can tell from my personal experience. I've used this for a long time.
How long?
I think our first device, the entrainers are probably in the mid-2000s. So I don't do it. I haven't done it recently, but I trained my own IQ. So my IQ was progressively higher as I got older.
Wow.
So the IQ is supposed to peak in your 20s or something.
Right.
But, so maybe it's because of this. People who work with me probably can say that I'm pretty
sharp.
I know a lot of stuff. Okay.
Yeah. No, I know a little bit.
So, most people my age would have retired. Yeah, so I think from personal experience, this is helping. I'm not getting any dementia.
Any signs of
A lot
decline?
people who use this are reporting that they're not developing problems with their brain. So that is from experience. But actually doing clinical studies on healthy people is not easy to do, but we're going to do, particularly with brain imaging, and see what,
Not easy to do because of
Because not much
imaging.
to measure on the upside.
Right.
And it's hard to
It's a little subjective.
compare against sham, placebo.
Right.
But we hope we may be able to see tests on things like reaction time and stuff. Well, we may not be doing it. We are waiting for some data to come up with a couple of universities, publish and see what's happening with reaction time. And
How do we quantify a healthy brain? So are you actually, when someone comes into the study, if you were to say, I want to do a study on 100 healthy brains, what are you quantifying?
normal people, they come in and, part of the inclusion criteria is that you don't have a problem with, you haven't got a stroke, you're not being diagnosed with dementia and stuff.
So not too wide.
We do probably use the MOCA or, MMSC, normally a test of your cognitive ability, very simple test, to see that your brain is functioning normally. And then measure probably some brain performance. We are going to do a study, actually going to start pretty soon, tracking the EEG of healthy brains before and after this. We are going to even track them in real time and see how the brain waveforms are changing with this. Even healthy brains may have some issues,
Sure.
Who knows? The popular imaging done with a lot of, say, neurofeedback practitioners, the QEEG, brain maps, you can see, okay, you think you're healthy, but maybe you're not.
Right. Do you think this would help with people with diabetes who start to get elevated, a lot of them start to get dementia because of decreasing mitochondrial function in the brain?
Yeah, we haven't tracked diabetes and pre-diabetic, but I can say that before I actually used this regularly, I was diagnosed, I was in California at the time, I was diagnosed as pre-diabetic. After using it, I developed this after like 1 year later. Everything's normal. I was pre-diabetic and I had high cholesterol.
Really? No.
Next year, everything is perfect.
God. That's interesting. So one of the things that actually, you may have heard of this study. I don't know the numbers exactly, but there was a recent study released, or maybe it wasn't recent, I just heard about it recently, where they examined the caloric expenditure of the brain in isolation from people playing chess. And it was just like ludicrously high caloric expenditure. And so I'm curious if you could look at the caloric output or the caloric demand of something like this, if it's increasing the mitochondrial function, if it's increasing, blood flow to the brain, if there's actually some significant changes in caloric expenditure.
I think from the imaging we're seeing from fMRI, real time, there will be more oxygen being directed to the mitochondria to produce the energy. So I think it's happening. How do we measure it? I'm not quite sure. How you measure? Yeah. Well, we're already doing it through fMRI imaging.
Yeah, I don't know how they'd measure caloric expenditure in the brain. I thought you might have an insight on that, because if they measure it in these chess players, I have to imagine it's possible. I don't know how though.
When they do actually playing chess.
Mm-hmm.
We can measure when somebody's lying in
just with respired gases.
Yeah. in doing this, and you see greater oxygen level in the brain. In terms of blood flow, and actually, I think oxygen being redirected to the mitochondria to produce more energy.
I think you're going to start seeing poker players showing up at the World Series of Poker with this thing on their head, and everyone's going to have it at the poker and chess players are going to be using this.
Actually, what I want to see or to try to see is how people, especially athletes, can get into the flow state.
Oh, yeah.
So I can relate it to, when people are in the flow state, they shouldn't be thinking too much. You shouldn't be using too much of your prefrontal cortex and think. So sometimes I think when I watch a game on television, like say basketball, so you see they're missing the baskets, when they usually would put it in.
Yeah, they think so.
At the free throw line, they're missing it. So they're thinking, they're missing it. There's too much pressure. I think they're thinking. So they're out of that particular state. Let your body do its work. I mean, these hundreds and hundreds of hours of training would have put you into that state.
Right.
Your muscle memory would have done it. When I think about someone like Steph Curry, 3-pointers, he moves so fast doing this, just throwing it in. You look at his face, I don't think he's even thinking. He's
just get doing. Yeah, so much repetition.
And those who are missing it are just thinking. So I think that he gets into this state more naturally than others, other than the fact that he's talented, in doing that kind of stuff. So it is that state of brain. And although you are in a stressful situation, in a game, but your mind I think there's a lot of slow wave activity, not too much using the default mode network. Out of the alpha state, actually when you're in a flow state, you should be out of the alpha state. Alpha state is like 10 hertz. So somewhere there, you are activating this slow state because that is where the autonomic system, the part of the brain where you're not thinking, and also high frequency state, or possibly where more of the brains are functioning together. So I think to get in a flow state is get your brain to be able to get into that state naturally without thinking. But when you're training and try to learn new skills, I think you need the high frequency.
So gamma when you're training, alpha when you're trying to get
into the memory. Actually, the like higher than 40 hertz, we get into memory consolidation, and when you're maybe 80 hertz higher than that, and when you're 40 hertz, you're actually more to do with consolidation of memory. So, but when you're not in the field and not performing, I think you can go into the alpha state because that's where your default mode comes in. It helps you to, get into your brain consolidation, getting a stronger.
And so how would you time it? Would you suggest using the gamma in the morning and the alpha in the evening, or like gamma to consolidate memories at night, or would that be too stimulating for someone at night?
Yeah, I get this report from people that when they use gamma in the evening, it is
stimulating.
Yeah, there processing going on in the brain, and it is not for some. I think especially in the beginning, it was not helping in the sleep, so they use alpha. Alpha get you into that state where you are, introspectively, resting and so on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So gamma early in the day or before I'm going to train or something. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So can you just, in wrapping, compare, you said there's the NeuroPro and there's the Vielight, and what's the NeuroPro and how do they compare?
So the NeuroPro is not meant No, people can use it. So the NeuroPro are actually designed for researchers,
Okay.
Clinicians who understand EEG, able to read and able to understand what they need to do to correct the brain. It is also used by another group of people who are long-term meditators and wants to get into that state where the brain is more expansive, and you have this maybe a feeling of bliss, a bliss state. So they can do this sweep. So NeuroPro allows you to go and program a sweep. Like you start with 4 hertz or 2 hertz or whatever. 5 hertz, you go in incremental stages of the next 5 hertz, from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 and so on. So after like 2 minutes here, 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Yep.
Until it hits a certain frequency where, like long-term meditators, that it will experience the mind expanding.
That sounds like fun.
So
sign me up, Dr. Lew. How do I get it?
So I don't know what you're going to experience because, like I say, I'm not a long-term meditator.
Is that available on the website? You can purchase those?
Yeah. Actually, the NeuroPro is available. We're actually running, at the moment, we're running of stock, but it'll be available in a couple of months. But these ones are available. The Neuro Alpha, Neuro Gamma, the intranasal we have. The intranasal we have can do multiple things. So they're a lot cheaper than this full transcranial helmet. But it does other things like it has visible red, which is in the nose, not quite reaching the brain, but can go through your circulatory system. We have both the LED and the laser version, the low-level laser version. Then we have the blue, which is antimicrobial. Blue has been found.
So this is different devices, or this one device that can do it?
Don't have it. Unfortunately, it's not here.
Fair.
But it's on a website. It's called an MIP. MIP stands for Multimodal Intranasal Photobiomodulation. It's a mouthful, so it's MIP. So we have the blue for antimicrobial. If you feel an infection in your sinus area or, in the nose, it could be helpful. Then you have the fourth one, which is the near infrared, which is meant from the nose to go from the nose to the brain. That can be, so this little device has its intelligence. It can, you know which one you've slotted into, into the controller. It knows whether it is red, infrared, or whatever it is. Now, the infrared, it can also sense that you've slotted in the near infrared, which is the 810. And then it allows you to switch between 10 hertz and 40 hertz too. So at a low cost, I think with all this combination is $499. Then you have, you can choose. If you don't want to have the whole thing, I don't know all the.
Yeah, but somebody's going to need to know what all these things do. So you guys have.
So it's the device on the website actually is moving very fast. It's becoming very popular because now we have one little device with
all the different functions.
So just go to the website. It's there, MIP. Fortunately, I don't have it here. So you have this one that goes to the brain as well, 10 hertz and 40 hertz.
Beautiful. But that you can't get the one that goes to the brain on the Vielight. It doesn't have that?
That's the Vielight MIP. This is the Vielight Neuro. So this one only has the one that goes to the brain. So this is focused mainly on the brain.
Okay. And so these are the same, these different ones. This is just the newer.
This newer one is going to come out in a few months. So for now, that's available. So this new one is, stay tuned.
More advanced.
Yeah, it's more advanced here. So for now, this is available.
That's amazing. Do you want to mention the website where people can purchase the device? We're obviously linked to it in my show notes.
The website, the Vielight, Vielight.com. You see a lot of information, maybe to pregnant with information. I don't know where it's to. Hopefully, it's easy to navigate.
Yeah.
With all the different devices. What's good is we teach. The website teaches you about photobiomodulation. It shows you the research. I think somewhere there it shows who we are collaborating with. We're collaborating with like 30 researchers around the world.
That's amazing.
There's a lot going on in this company. It's a small company, but we pride ourselves,
Yeah, so you got a lot of irons in the fire, and there's so many people that want to use your product, which is wonderful. It means you're doing something right.
Thank you.
Sir, I appreciate you being here, or letting me be here with you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming, Ben.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Ben Pakulski. This is the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. My mission with this podcast is to give you back your power. Bodybuilding, muscle building, health optimization has given me so much in my life, and I hope it can give you the same, from empowerment to confidence to ultimate what I believe is a successful life. And for me, success isn't about the money in my bank account. It's ultimately living authentically with who I am. And ultimately, bodybuilding and muscle building has allowed me to do that. Build my confidence, face my demons, face my insecurities, and work through them. And so I hope this podcast is valuable to you to allow you to fuel your journey to optimize your brain, your energy, and your body. Ladies and gents, thank you for being here. And one more shout out to our sponsor, Bioptimizers. That's bioptimizers.com/muscle, and use the code MUSCLE10 to get hooked up.
Thank you so much for tuning into Muscle Intelligence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to share it with at least one person you know. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Ben Pakulski and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.